Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. We delve into the spine-chilling world of cryptids horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. I think I have a Bigfoot problem. Throughout the days we take our two dogs outside to their kennels so they can get out of the house for a while and run and play and such. These are not small dogs. One is a black lab/husky mix and the other one is a full-blooded Staffordshire Terrier, pit bull. The kennels are placed at the edge of the yard near the woods. These woods are big, large enough to take a day to go hiking through them. Lately, when it gets dark, the dogs seem on edge. They will bark and whine toward the house to come in. At first, I figured they just wanted to get back into the house, but now I'm thinking they're actually scared. 3 nights ago when I went to get them it was already dark, but we have a security light, so it isn't pitch black or anything. I got to the front of the first kennel and noticed both dogs were being quiet. They always bark at me excitedly when I go to get them, but they were dead silent. This weirded me out a little, but not to the point of being scared. I will admit that there was a certain uneasiness in the air though, something I can't explain, but it sort of felt electric, like I was about to be shocked. The longer I was there, the more uneasy I felt. I started getting the first dog, the lab, out and heard a heavy snap in the woods near the kennels. I froze. The dogs froze. By this time I was so on edge that if someone had spoken I would have jumped, screamed, and possibly ran. The creepy feeling in the air just kept getting thicker. The lab had her bushy tail stuffed underneath her and was whining. This didn't make me feel any better. The pit bull was as far away from the woods as she could get, whimpering for me to come get her. I can only take one dog in at a time because they get too excited and will sometimes try to fight, so I avoid that at all costs. I felt so bad leaving the pitty there by herself, but I had to do it. As I walked away, she barked this high-pitched whining type of bark at me that I have never heard her do before. The lab couldn't get to the house quick enough. I went back for the other one and dreaded every step as her door is right at the base of the woods. I would have to turn my back to the woods to open her door and get her out. The air felt heavy and stale, with an unpleasant smell, like a dead skunk, as I approached the kennel. Another snap and I was about ready to run for it, but I didn't want to leave my dog, who had her head down defensively facing the woods. I could barely make it. To be honest, it felt like trying to walk through water. I was terrified by the time I reached the door. I heard heavy breathing behind me as I got my dog out. She was scared too, but started growling behind me. I was frozen in place. The breathing continued for a minute before I heard steps started coming toward us. We both took off at the same time. A terrifying scream came out of the base of the woods. I didn't dare look back. I just ran. My pity pulled me all the way back to the house. I got in, flipped off all the lights and stared out the window at the woods. I could see something moving slightly, but just out of the light. It moved back and forth for about 5 minutes, then disappeared. It took me forever to fall asleep that night because I was so scared that every little noise freaked me out. The next night I went to get the dogs earlier, right around dusk. I thought all was good until I was getting my pitty out. A huge snapping sound, like a tree branch had just been snapped in half, rang out. It sounded pretty far away, so I just hurriedly got my dog and started toward the house. A few steps away from the kennel, I heard something big start charging toward me from inside the woods. We ran again, and it appeared to follow for so long, then retreated back. Now, every night since then I hear sounds coming out of the woods like branches breaking and being thrown around, knocking on trees and roaring. I am absolutely terrified. I no longer even take my dogs down. I just take them for walks during the day and make sure we are all in before dusk. I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about buying a gun, but I'm not sure it will help. Second story. What happens when black-eyed kids come inside? Let's start at the beginning. New Year's Eve. Everybody is out partying it up, celebrating, drinking, and having an overall awesome time. And this year it was no different for me. I partied it up with my friends, got far too drunk on shots of rum and Fireball, drunkenly stumbled my way into my house after the Uber dropped me off around 2:30-ish in the morning. I remember going to my fridge, grabbing a bottle of Gatorade and chugging it, knowing it would probably be one of the best things to prevent the hangover I hoped to avoid when I woke up later. I was just about to wash my face off and get ready to pass into sweet oblivion for the next few hours when I heard a knock at my door. I checked the time on my phone, 2:48 a.m. My booze fog brain didn't think much about who would be at my door at that hour, just that I had someone knocking and I should see who it was. Happy New Year. I remember shouting as I opened my door to see a small child, maybe 10 or 11, standing out in the cold. Even in my present state, I knew something was wrong. The alarm bells were going off, but my stupid ass couldn't tell that they were screaming that a kid being at my door, alone, at damn near 3 in the morning was ridiculously weird, even on New Year's. "You okay?" I had asked, staring at the kid. "I'm lost. May I come in and use your phone?" he asked. His voice was flat, not scared like I'd think any normal kid in his situation would have been. Another red flag. Ignored. And what kid in this freaking century not have a cell phone? I've seen toddlers with iPhones for fuck's sake. Red flag 3. Completely ignored. "Sure, kid," I said, standing aside to let him in. He got this really creepy grin on his face. Holy shit, was this kid pale. I'm pale, but this kid was positively pasty. "You feelin' okay, kid? Want me to get you something warm to drink?" I handed my cell to the kid. His hands were freezing. Before he could answer, I wandered off into my kitchen and threw a mug of hot water in the microwave and grabbed out a bag of mint tea. "I hope you like mint," I called out to the kid, turning to see he was standing in the doorframe of my kitchen, still wearing that creepy-looking smile. It was wide and toothy, but it wasn't the normal little kid smile you'd expect. I was more like the freaky grin you give to your friends when you're about to do something really devious. Kid," I said, only then beginning to sober up. The microwave chirped, but by then something had me frozen in place. It took me a good 15 seconds to figure out exactly what felt so wrong about this kid, besides the fact he was smiling like the ghost chicks from Insidious. His eyes were black, not shiny supernatural demon black, devoid of light black, Vanta black. I remember cursing as I took a step back, and the kid's expression changed. Instead of that smile, it turned into a snarl. He screeched and lunged at me, and I stumbled to the side, smacking into a kitchen chair as I did. The kid turned sharply, launching himself at me again, and I struggled to jump out of the way, just barely making it as the kid ended up diving into the chair I had just hit my hip on. I ran out of my kitchen and into the living room, jumping over the back of the sofa to try and put space between me and the kid. My dexterity was not great. I fell into the coffee table, but at this point the alcohol's effects were waning greatly, and I stood up, only to see the kid racing around the couch after me. I did the only thing I could think of. I picked up the nearest thing to me, which happened to be a glass from earlier in the day, and threw it at the kid. It hit him in the jaw, and he seemed to be stunned for a moment. I took the opportunity to bolt. I raced toward my front door, which I had forgot to relock after letting the little freak of nature in, and yanked it open. Then, it hit me. Literally. The little shit had tackled me, and he was trying to claw and bite at me. For a kid, he was surprisingly strong. I'm no bodybuilder, but I'm not weak either. But this demonic crotch goblin was like a junkie on bath salts. I was holding his arms, trying not to let him claw my eyes out or take a bite out of my face, all the while kicking furiously to get him off me. I was screaming as loud as I could. I heard a neighbor shout from a few houses down, "Shut the fuck up." I don't know what neighbor it was, but if you're reading this, fuck you. I hope Lucifer's crotch goblin comes knocking on your door, you twat. Finally, one of my kicks hit home, and the kid rocked a little on top of me, giving me time to throw him off of me. I raced down the sidewalk, in the opposite direction of the asshole who cussed me out, and just kept running. My lungs burned, my side was cramping, but there was no way in hell I was slowing down to look back and check if that thing was behind me. Finally, I made it down to a quick trip and ran inside, scaring the night clerk as I screamed for him to turn off the automatic doors. The clerk behind the counter looked like he was about to piss his pants at this probably crackhead-looking chick who just ran in screaming bloody murder. "Lady, do you need help?" he asked in a shaky voice. Yes, I need help. I need you to call the police. There's a little psycho following me," I screamed, ducking behind a display shelf of beef jerky and peering at the doors, looking for the little shit to appear and launch in like a rabid badger. He called the police for me. Or maybe he had already hit the panic button when I had come barreling in. A few cruisers arrived in about 10 minutes, and they came in weapons drawn. By this point, I came out from behind the jerky, hands in the air. "I need your help. I was attacked," I said, looking at the clerk for some kind of validation. He just kind of glanced at me and then said to the cops that I came in screaming that someone was chasing me. I sighed with relief. "How much have you had to drink tonight?" one of the cops asked, both lowering and holstering their weapons. "Enough, but I swear this wasn't." The cop cut me off. "Do you have a description of who attacked you?" he asked. "It was a kid. Blue hoodie, dark blue. IT. He cut me off again. "A kid? How old?" 10, maybe 11? I said, and by now I could see the two officers exchange a look that said, "This lady's drunk off ass." "All right, ma'am, why don't we just take you home and—" "He was at my house. He might still be there," I pled, practically in tears. "We'll check it out, ma'am. Let's get you home." I got into the back of the cruiser, and as promised, they did in fact take me home. In hindsight, I probably should have told them it was a man that attacked me. They might have believed that more. Regardless, they did check my house, and other than my wide-open door, the microwave still beeping that the water for tea was ready, the fallen-over chair in the kitchen, my phone on the floor in the hallway, and the half-shattered glass in the living room, it was otherwise untouched. They cleared each room before telling me it was all right to re-enter my home. I gave up trying to explain what happened, and the cops told me they'd keep an eye out for any kid in the neighborhood. They said they'd make a note of this and have it on file, but that they couldn't do much else without better evidence of what actually happened. After they left, I locked my door and put a chair up against it. I checked all my windows to make sure they were closed and locked, and I didn't fall asleep until morning. I've felt watched ever since I woke up. From what I've read about BKs, I can't find much on what happens when you actually do let them in. I really hope this nightmare is over, but I don't feel safe right now. I'm terrified of hearing another knock or waking up with it on top of me about to make a snack of my face. I'm not sure what to do, but there's no fucking way I'm sleeping tonight. If anyone has any answers about what the hell I let into my house, and if it can come back, please let me know. And be careful. If some random kid shows up at your house in the middle of the night, do not answer your door. Third story. I live at the North Pole. I know it's a little while until Christmas, but I've heard multiple stories from this side and figured, what the hell? Why don't I give my 2 cents and share my experiences? To start, my name is Nick, and I work as the assistant of Krampus. That's right, the Christmas demon himself. I could tell you all about various horrors I've seen working under him, and I will eventually. But for now, I'll start with how I came to work for him. To begin, I lived in foster homes for the first 12 years of my life. My parents were killed in a car accident when I was a baby, and with no grandparents or siblings on either side, that's where I ended up. I've been to caves full of bloodthirsty yetis gnawing on the bones of helpless elves, and I still considered most of the foster homes I lived in to be worse. I say most because there were a few good ones with decent people running them. But as fate would have it, I was never at those kinds of foster homes for very long. I usually ended up at the ones with neglectful assholes and screaming brats running around. I dealt with them by trying to keep to myself. Thing is, they didn't understand boundaries. And quite a few times, I've had to beat a few of them down, which of course, got me transferred. One thing that helped me cope, besides readings and video games, were the holidays. I'm one of those people who celebrate them early. Starting in September, I'll do things that are horror-related up until the end of October. Of course, that means I tend to enjoy my job, so long as people I like aren't in danger anyway. From November up until early January, I do things that are Christmas-related, which gives another edge to my job. Anyway, listening to scary stories, watching scary movies, and listening to Christmas music helped me not to beat the living hell out of the other foster kids, and probably kept me from going too far and ending up in juvenile. But one night when I was 11, he showed up. It was night in early December. I was sleeping alone in one of the rooms. The reason being I beat up one of the kids for spitting on me. Then the little shit made my foster parents at the time believe that I punched him unprovoked. Thankfully, the idiots hadn't known me long enough to realize that what they did was more of a reward than a punishment. I was up late listening to Christmas music on an old MP3 player that I got from one of the good foster homes when I felt a strangely cold breeze coming through the open window. I thought about closing it, but I wanted to leave it open to waste the heat, just to spite them. I know that doesn't sound smart, but honestly, I prefer cold over heat anyway, although fall weather tends to be best. Anyhow, I was just going to wrap myself in my sheets. That is until I heard the distinct rattling of chains. At that point, I actually bothered to glance in the direction of the window. I saw a hand with long black nails grasping the apron, followed by another. Then his horns as he poked his head inside the room and slid inside. He stood up, nearly hitting his head on the ceiling due to being so tall, and looked right at me. I had two thoughts, staring into his amber eyes. The first was that I was dreaming, but this theory was quickly disproven when I pinched myself and found that I was indeed awake. The other was that I was hallucinating. It wasn't the first time I had, and I tended to stay up for days in a row, which caused me to see things sometimes. On that night, I had been up for 4 days straight, so naturally, I dismissed him as a hallucination and went back to listening to my music. Krampus got my attention by snapping his fingers, pretty persistent for a hallucination. I thought, closing my eyes. I figured getting a good night's sleep would be enough to get rid of Krampus, much to his annoyance. He went over to me and shook me awake. "Wake up, you little shit," he hissed at me. At that point, the realization that he was very real hit me. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth and assured me that he wasn't here to cause me harm. Then he said he'd remove his hand on the condition I keep quiet. I nodded and he removed his hand. At first, I couldn't find it in me to speak, but after a few moments, what came out was, "Are you Krampus?" "Me? No. I mean, who else has horns on his head and hooves for feet? The Easter Bunny, right?" "Yes, dumbass. I am Krampus. You don't have to be rude. And I thought you were just a myth. I only heard about Krampus once. It was from a book of mythical creatures that I checked out from my library once. Oh, I am very real, Nick. Believe me. And I'm here for you. That's when I realized something else. Wait a sec. If you're real, then that must mean that Santa Claus is real too, I said, unintentionally raising my voice from excitement. Sure. What did I just get through telling you? Oh, sorry. But if you're here, then I must be on the naughty list, huh? So what are you going to do to me? Put me in your sack and beat me? Boil me in tar? Take me to hell? What the fuck? No. Is all that some weird shit you humans have come up with about me? I swear to God, your species doesn't know jack shit about anything. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to offer you an opportunity to come with me. For what? I was very curious about what would happen to me if I did. You see, there is a naughty and nice list. But things aren't that black and white. Most people tend to fall closer to the center, but lean more towards one side. For example, you could have someone who has no regards for the law, but they donate a lot to charity and help people, so they be closer to good. On the other hand, you could have a perfectly law-abiding citizen, but they ignorantly look down on people who are less fortunate and assume it's always due to them not trying enough, and not other factors. This mentality would push them more towards the naughty list. However, when it comes to where you fall between naughty and nice, you are unique, Nick. How so? You are the only person to always be in the middle. You are not more naughty or more nice. You are the true neutral. Really? I'm the only one out of all the kids there are? I thought the same thing, but apparently, I was going to dispute him further. However, memories of getting only some of the things I asked for on Christmas came flooding back to me. I always just thought it was because my foster parents were cheap or didn't have the money. But now I know it was because I was the true neutral. So, what happens to me now? Do I have to do some things to get me on the nice list? As it stands now, that wouldn't work. Come on. Why not? Because it isn't genuine. Does it need to be? As a matter of fact, it does. The process of deciding who ends up closer to which list is extremely complex. After all, if someone only does something nice because they expect compensation for it, are they really being nice? And if someone wants to do good, but they end up doing wrong because of either anger issues or factors beyond their control, are they really bad? Or do they just need some guidance? Do I need guidance? You do. Me and Santa were actually arguing over who should handle you. We settled the matter on an intense game of rock, paper, scissors. And after many ties, I came out the winner. So, will you accept my offer? What happens if I do? For starters, you get to leave this place behind, and you'll never live in another foster home for as long as you live. As for the rest, you'll find out. Well, just about anything is better than living here. Sure, I'll go with you. But I can't just leave this place on my own. Not to worry, I can just adopt you. I have ways of persuading people, so it won't take long. You are going to walk up to them as you are now and try to adopt me? I can make myself look more human to people. You mean like shape-shifting? Not exactly. It'd be more like you'd see me how I really am, but other people would just see me as a regular guy. So it's magic? Could you teach me some? That would be so cool. All that and more, Nick. But before I go, I want to give you something. He reached into his sack and pulled out a glass bottle full of eggnog, then told me he heard I loved the stuff, and offered me some. I happily drank it. This is the best tasting eggnog I've ever had. You made this? Not me. Mrs. Claus. She'll be glad to know you enjoyed it so much. I'll see you later, kid. See you later, Krampus. He left. Then I laid back down, wondering if that was all real after all. He came by again, next week, and asked to adopt me. Specifically, my foster parents said he'd have to go through a social worker. Thankfully, it wasn't an issue. As it turns out, Krampus had a lot of money from the various treasures he's found, and he has purchased several homes with it. Determining that he had a decent home environment and would prove to be a good legal guardian for me only took 6 months. I actually ended up getting adopted in June, on my birthday. After that, I was taken to the North Pole. He took me in his sleigh because I asked if he happened to have one and if I could ride in it, and he agreed. His sleigh was pretty badass. It was jet black with a frame and legs that were red, and he also had 9 reindeer pulling it. And he actually takes off like this. Now Skamer, now Schwanzer, now Fatzer and Ficken, now Arschloch, now Dush, now Stetchen and Titten. Lead the way, Kokine. Everyone fly us to the sky and take us the fuck away from here. They took off like a bullet out of a gun, and I was not prepared for it. Slow down. Tell them to slow down. I screamed. Krampus just gave a booming laugh. What's wrong, Nick? I thought you wanted a ride in my sleigh? Yeah, but I still want to be alive afterward. Thankfully, we arrived at the North Pole in no time at all. There was a special area far in the sky we had to go to. Krampus snapped his fingers. Then I noticed the air in front of the sleigh was rippling. This was a portal only accessible to people who had permission to enter the North Pole. We passed through it and were greeted with an amazing sight. Below us were the lights of many villages. Some houses were red, some were green, some were silver, some were gold, and some were made up of several or all of these colors, or different colors altogether. You like it? I love it. And, are those elves? I asked, seeing figures walking around who were too far away from where we were in the sky for me to properly see what they looked like. Yep, I got some at my place, but let's just say they aren't exactly as cheery as the elves you see here. Can we just stop by for a bit, please? I want to see Santa. Nick, I hate to break it to you, but me and him aren't exactly fond of one another. As a matter of fact, I can't stand him. What? I thought you guys were friends. We were. Mrs. Claus and I still are, though. Speaking of which, he said, noticing her waving her arms at us from far below on the ground. Krampus landed the sleigh in front of her. Krampus, thank God you're here, she said, frantically with tears in her eyes. Calm down, Martha. What's wrong? Krampus asked. It's Chris. Krampus sighed in irritation. What happened to him this time? A couple of weeks ago, some of the elves went missing. Last week, Chris went to look for them, then went missing too. Any clues? We found some Yeti footprints nearby. If they have him, who knows what they'll do to him? Fuck that. I'm not going to let some albino apes kill Father Christmas. I yelled. Krampus, who is this? Remember that kid me and Chris argued about? This is him. Oh, nice to meet you, sweetie. It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Claus. No need to be so formal. You can call me Martha if you like. Okay, Martha. Where would these Yetis have taken Santa? There's a cave entrance on top of a mountain nearby. But why don't you stay here? It's far too dangerous for someone of your age. But I want to help. The kid needs hand-on experience for what he's going to end up doing. I think this is a perfect opportunity for him, and I'm happy to see him so eager. But he's just a kid, Krampus. You gotta start somewhere, and I wouldn't do this unless I knew it was safe. Before Martha could respond, Krampus and I hopped back in the sleigh. Then he snapped the reins, and it took off again. We went to the mountain, Martha mentioned. and stopped our sleigh in front of the cave. Shouldn't we have grabbed a weapon first? I asked. Already got some. My 2 horns. And this, he said, pulling something from his sack. And it was a circular blade made up of 4 parts. Each part was connected by a long chain with parts of a saw chain embedded in each link. Wow. Awesome. What do you call that thing? The cookie cutter. Now come on. Let's rescue my old bastard of a former partner. We went into the cave. The deeper we went, the louder the moans were. They were moans of pain that sent chills down my spine and made me think about running back to the entrance. But I was determined to help Santa. We finally found the source of the moans. It was a group of yetis, gnawing on the body parts of different elves. Only a few limbs were left on the ground, but it was enough to make me vomit, which drew their attention. They all let out roars and began to attack. Fortunately, they weren't a problem for Krampus. He decapitated all 6 of them pretty quick. One of the heads rolled to my feet, which would have made me gag again, had I not heard the moaning again. We found Santa, bleeding and slumped against the cave wall. It's okay, Santa. We're here now, I said, but he had lost consciousness. Can't believe I have to help his sorry ass again. He better do something extra nice for Martha, Krampus said, slinging Santa over his shoulder. He actually isn't as fat as I was led to believe. Krampus put him in the sleigh. Then we took him back to Mrs. Claus. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she said, hugging Krampus and me. You're welcome, Martha, Krampus said. I don't know if I deserve thanks. Krampus did the work. I just watched. But you were still brave enough to go. Chris will definitely appreciate it. She then had some elves help bring Santa inside. The elves were not short like I thought they would be. In fact, they were closer to fantasy elves, but dressed in the same colored clothes as traditional Christmas elves. Not gonna lie, some of them are pretty cute. The reason people think they are short is because child elves tend to wander away from the North Pole and are sometimes sighted by people. It's a common misconception. Anyway, we said goodbye to Mrs. Claus, then headed to Krampus's home. His home was basically a dark castle. The mood surrounding it was the exact opposite of what I just witnessed by the elf villages. Krampus opened the doors. The inside was somehow colder than outside. Krampus led me to my room. Along the way, we passed more elves, but these looked different. They had the appearance of being overworked. Some had circles under their eyes, which I am no stranger to. I did get a few weird looks from some of them, but most seemed to disregard me. This is where you sleep. I had been taken to the furthest room in the castle basement, and it was a single bed with a thin sheet and blanket over it. This is it? I asked, stepping inside. Yep. Make yourself at home, Krampus replied, then closed the door and left, leaving me all by myself. It wasn't until I sat on the bed that I realized just how tired I was. I guess the adrenaline of everything that happened that day finally wore off. I kicked my shoes off, then fell asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. It's been over 12 years since then, and I've picked up quite a few tricks working under him, one of which is the ability to get around the world in one night. This is done via portal creation, which was performed using the same snapping trick Krampus used. The castle was actually pretty cool once I got used to it. The main drawback, however, was that there was no internet, so I have to go to different places with Wi-Fi to get internet. In fact, I'm sitting in a McDonald's posting this right now. I've been trying to figure out how to set up internet back home. No luck so far, but I'm not going to give up. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. I'll be back to tell you all about more experiences I've had. But for now, this is Nick, the assistant of Krampus, logging off. Stay safe, everyone. Fourth story. If you see someone waving you down on a desolate highway, don't stop. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas, to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, and they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit, but I didn't mind. I love road trips. There's nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah, a sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January, and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up extra early that morning, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I headed farther west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area, to the savannas of the Edwards Plateau, to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's breadbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie, and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the Land of Enchantment" sign. Now I was really in the middle of nowhere. Continuing on U.S. Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I would get a chance to visit again? As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Ballin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day, I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on U.S. Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I would get to Cortez, my planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out, as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy, just a straight shot. But looking back on it now, I figured that, had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell the night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now, and possibly be making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on that desolate highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side of me were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down like smoldering embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see the forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had my road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next piece of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness, an abyss I had to cross. I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles, and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon. Barely lit by the moonlight, I thought it was a road sign at first. Then as AI came closer, I realized it was a person, walking on the shoulder of the road, heading in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long, black hair flowing down past their chest. Who could be walking out here, all alone, at night? I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing cars that they were there. And they walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving them a wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely dark, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. While this was unusual, It certainly did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. Oh no, 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 I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a wool poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him. But in that split second, I realized with abject shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow, he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. My stereo abruptly turned back on and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination, the darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations sadly had high rates of alcoholism. I looked in my rearview mirror. He was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on, trying to figuring out what had just happened, but at the same time, forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night? There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out that this person was also wearing a poncho. Then I saw what looked like long, black hair, reaching down past the chest. No, there's no way. It was the man. The same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What did this guy want? I kept up my pace, with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leapt out onto the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked onto mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging onto his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dry dirt stuck in the locks, but his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was all right. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running. He was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible. But as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove. But every time I looked in the mirror, I would still see him right behind me, perfectly keeping pace, his body tinted red by my tail lights. I could feel my temples throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead, but I was still too far away. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a deep breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man, at least. I didn't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal. Some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car, its forelimbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see, little by little. Then I noticed its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was oddly round, and from it came a trail of long, black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now I was clocking well over 110 miles per hour. But this creature, it kept up. It wasn't fazed. It simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what was this thing? How could anyone or anything run this fast? The entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep this up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon, my car would hit its top speed. And then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats. But regardless, I would eventually run out of gas. And when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles per hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go. But the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on a tumultuous sea, the first light of shiprock came into view. It was close. So close. If I could just go a little longer, I could make it into town. To safety. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking in my periphery, I saw the undulation of the creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now, it was slipping away, steering farther and farther from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone. But this time, the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I breathed a deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. The creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore, but I was glad to have made through. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I had experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered toward a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there. Fifth story. The new Bigfoot. Shit, I think I just hit a bear. I thought to myself as I hit the brakes and pulled over onto the shoulder. The windshield was crushed, the hood was dented, but surprisingly there was no blood. It had happened way too fast for me to react. I was just driving along. Then there was a brown, furry mass, then a huge racket, and all of a sudden I'm driving a busted car with a screwed-up windshield. I better go back and pull the bear off to the side of the road. Make sure nobody else hits it, I thought. Hitting a bear is bad, but running over a bear, with all its teeth and claws and pointy bits, had to be worse. I got out of my car and put on my jacket I had in the back seat. The snow that had been coming down lightly all day had picked up, and so had the wind, making my journey to retrieve this poor bear all the more annoying. I started walking back along the side of the road, towards where I had hit the thing. I figured it must be a few hundred feet from where I had parked, considering how far I had driven after I had made contact. Walking along the shoulder, wind and snow in my face, and the light from my phone illuminating my path, I was trying to tell myself it was okay and that these things happen. There's no way I could have seen that bear out there. It just popped out and I reacted as fast as I could. I was going to call 311 when I found it, and then be on my merry way. But I found something strange, or rather I didn't find anything. I had walked far past where I thought I was going to find it laying in the road, but I couldn't find the remains of this bear. There was no way that it had survived the impact. I hit it pretty straight on and heard the thing tumble over the top of my car and down on the other side as I drove away. Plus, the bear had been walking on its hind legs, so my guess was that it wasn't as protected as it could have been if it was walking on all fours. Maybe I missed it, I thought. There's no way that I hit it this far back, and it couldn't have gotten up and walked off. Given the terrible weather, I said oh well, and began to walk back towards my car. The woods had always kind of freaked me out, especially being a city boy in the middle of Colorado. I did like getting away from the office and visiting my uncle up here, but the mountain resorts and rural escapes did have the downside of scaring the ever-loving crap out of me. Then I heard a huge crack coming from the woods off the side of the road. It wasn't like a branch falling from a tree in a storm. This was a huge, oh my God, there's something out there snapping sound. It was like a tree was literally being ripped away from its stump by sheer force. There's no way a bear can be both alive and in good enough shape to do something like that after I hit it with my car, I thought. I must have really pissed it off. Then, amidst my fear, I stopped and thought about that sound a bit more. A bear doesn't do that under normal circumstances. Bears are strong, but they don't go ripping trees off of their stumps, especially not after I clobber them head-on with my car. I decided not to ponder anymore, and instead I thought it best to leave whatever was ripping the trees out of the ground on its own. I started to walk with a much quicker pace back to my car, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth due to the high elevation. Then I heard another, ear-splitting crack, more forceful than the one before. Not only was it louder, but it was closer to me than before, and I realized that whatever was out in the woods was aware that I was on the road. I decided to make it work if it was going to catch me. Well, that's how I put it now, when really my thoughts were more along the lines of, oh please no, I want to live, I need to escape this thing. I broke into a fast jog, still breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. I tried hard not to think about what was out there, and that imagining what a funny story this would be for Uncle Steve when I eventually got back to the condo. He was going to make me feel like such a wimp when I told him I was running away from noises in the woods, which he probably hears all the time. Then I heard thumping behind me. Something big, heavy, and angry was gaining on me from behind. And this absolutely wasn't my imagination. Just as I realized I couldn't outrun this thing, I saw my car in the distance. I might just get out of here, I exclaimed to myself. But as soon as I had that thought, the animal that had been ripping trees up popped out in front of me. For one thing, I nearly fear-shit my pants, and the other was my surprise at what this animal actually was. It wasn't a bear, but I could see why I thought it was. It was 9-odd feet tall, standing on 2 very thick legs. It had actual feet, which were absolutely massive. Now, I have big feet, size 14s to be exact, but this thing had feet that were at least twice as big as mine. It was covered in thick, brown hair, had a man-like but somehow apish face, and was terrifying. Furthermore, it was just staring at me with an expression that said, I am very mad. It wasn't eating me, or tearing me limb from limb, or making jelly from my bones and spreading it on his 8-man toast. Just staring. Then, to my even bigger surprise, it spoke to me. I'll have you know that really hurt, it said, in a rather collected and eloquent English accent. I think you've done in my leg. Now I can barely walk. How the hell am I going to gather food? I glanced down at his legs, and there was a rudimentary splint made from tree bark and rope I had in my car wrapped around his right knee and calf. Weirdly, my first thought was he stole my rope. What a jerk. What have you got to say for yourself? He asked, sternly but without being particularly threatening. I didn't know how to respond. I had found Bigfoot, at least I think, and not only was he real, but he spoke extremely good English. Against my better judgment, I decided to speak, but the only thing I managed to say might have just gotten me actually eaten. That's my rope, I said. I had always kept some rudimentary survival gear in my car when I came up into the mountains. There was some rope, non-perishable food, a sat phone, and a radio in a little packet tucked into my trunk. I never had any intention of using it. I was keeping it for a rainy day. But pointing this out to a gigantic cryptid? I must have sounded crazy, even to this thing. Is that really what you're going to say? He rightfully retorted. You've got a legendary woodland creature standing in front of you demanding an apology for a shattered leg, and all you can muster is you stole my rope? Are you mad? He stared at me for another second. Well, I did, but that's not the point. You've broken my leg, so I had to do something. I wasn't just going to let it heal wrong. Sorry, I said. I couldn't muster the words to describe what was going through my head at this point. I'm pretty sure that was due to my own ability to describe what I was seeing. I did have thoughts, and the best words I can use to describe them include bewildered, aghast, petrified, and up shit creek without a paddle. Well, you're going to have to pay me back somehow, he said. You obviously can't take me to a hospital, because that would cause a great hullabaloo. He sat there pondering for a moment, while I started to wonder, how in the hell does Bigfoot know about hospitals? Isn't he an Australopithecus? That's what my anthropology teacher mentioned, right? I could barely gather my thoughts before he spoke again. You know what? How would you like to be the new Bigfoot? It's getting time for me to retire anyway. I had no idea that Bigfoot retirement was a thing. Hasn't there always been one Bigfoot? Or a small family? What the hell was Bigfoot talking about? He noticed my stunned, slightly confused silence. You didn't seriously think that there was only one Bigfoot, did you? He asked me, slightly amused. You're that naive? Oh God. He began to laugh hard. I was slightly embarrassed, but a wave of calm curiosity overtook me. All of a sudden, I was dying to know more about this thing and their career situation. Okay, let me explain. With the exception of a few of us, such as Nessie, the Kraken, and Cthulhu, most don't actually live past a slightly longer than average lifespan. I got this job in the 60s after I accidentally shot Bigfoot while on a hunting trip. I was absolutely stunned. This is how the myth kept going? Just kidnapping people that came across you? I was very confused, but the calmness that had come over me earlier continued its effect. Bigfoot continued. The last cryptid to get replaced was Yeti, who was wounded by a Sherpa that happened across his path. I was still terrified and amazed, but thankfully much less confused. So I have to become your apprentice? I asked. That's about the size of it. You'll never get to see your family again, and they'll never get closure on your mysterious disappearance. A few conspiracy theorists will come to the conclusion that I have abducted you, killed you, or eaten you, or something to that effect, but they will be marginalized and told that they are wrong. It's a hard job to accept, but you have no choice, and someone has to do it. Why is that? I asked. Why not just retire and not take an apprentice? Does there really have to be all these monsters running around? It seemed a bit silly that all of these animals were purposefully keeping the myth around. Why not just let it die out? How I managed to ask this so calmly when I was so panicked beforehand is beyond me. You'll find out soon enough, Bigfoot said, winking at me. I'm not actually allowed to tell you, but trust me, As soon as you take the job, you'll be informed. I had a burning desire to ask Bigfoot more questions about who was keeping him employed and why he had to, and I could feel all the care of my old life being sucked away, readily accepting my new position as Bigfoot apprentice. Bigfoot walked over to the side of the road, casually stepped over the barrier, yanked a small tree out of the ground to use as a walking stick, and gestured to me to follow him into the woods. He talked to me as we walked. "You're a big guy, so it won't take you long to adapt to the job. You'll have to dress in your underwear for a little while. Soon enough the adaptation process will begin, and you'll start to grow hair all over your body." That part terrified me, but I guess I wouldn't have to worry about someone finding me overly hairy, considering I was going to be Bigfoot. "You'll also start to get taller, which is a very painful process, but it happens fast, so don't worry about it. Once you've got the looks part down, you'll have to start scaring backwoods wanderers, leaving footprints, poop, and such for people to find to keep the Bigfoot myth alive." Being Bigfoot sounded like it took a lot of energy. If you don't keep the myth alive, you'll be in big trouble. But if you get caught, you'll be in even bigger trouble. So do not get caught under any circumstances. Better to not leave many clues than to get discovered. Don't get caught. Number one thing. I was attempting to take mental notes, even though part of me still really hoped that I was dreaming. Try to stay away from those Finding Bigfoot documentaries. For one thing, there are a lot of them, and appearing in every one that comes looking for you might get people more believing than is safe. Try to spook a few of the people making them, but don't go overboard. Just have fun with it. Nature documentary's good, but don't overdo it, noted. After what seemed like 5 minutes, but in reality must have been more like 5 miles, we reached a cave in the side of a mountain, and Bigfoot stopped walking. "This is your new home, for now," he told me. "We're going to have to move soon. People will come looking for you. That's another thing. Keep mobile. Stay in one place too long, and they'll learn your location and get dangerously close to discovering you. Keep mobile. Got it." Bigfoot turned away from the cave and towards me. He checked his leg, let out a big groan, and then continued. "Right? We need to begin training immediately. Rip off your shirt and let the hair start to grow."